No Olympics.
Yeah, so I think great. So as we're wrapping up with our No Olympics theme song and start to dive into the main event. Thanks so much, everyone, for spending this part of your Saturday with us for another transnational teach-in with one of our allies, fighting the Olympic Games. Um, so just to get started and introduce myself, I'm Anne, she, her, hers. I'm with an organizer with NOlympics LA. I'm also a member of the LA Tenants Union and DSA LA. And yeah, so I've been organizing and part of NOlympics since the beginning. And we started in the spring of 2017 when our city was still in the bidding process. And today's teach-in will be led by Natsuko, who is a member of our Parisian counterpart group. And she's going to be talking about their struggle in Paris, what's happening currently, and kind of some of the history and national context and perceptions of the games in France. And I'm really excited about this because, our struggles in Paris and LA have been very much intertwined since the beginning. Because of the bidding process, a lot of folks may know this, but just to repeat, 2024, basically every city by a certain point dropped out except for Paris and LA. And then our mayors, so Eric Garcetti in LA and Anne Hidalgo in Paris, basically made this joint deal with the IOC for 2024 and 2028. So it really does feel like our sort of fates have been linked since the beginning of this process, and that in order to fight the games and fight the bids, it really, makes sense to do it together. Also really specifically excited to have Natsuko here as well, in addition to, as you'll all find out shortly, being really brilliant and funny. She's also originally from Japan, so she brings a different sort of perspective and context, and also has a deep connection to the struggle with the Tokyo Games as well. So I guess without further ado, to dive in, I'm going to turn it over to Natsuko, and just want to make sure, can everyone see her screen in the presentation? I guess I can't see people, but maybe type in the chat. Okay, cool. Looks good. All right, so Natsuko, all you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you everyone for having me. And as she introduced me, I'm a Japanese. Maybe it's obvious with my accent and with my face and with my yukata. And I will talk. But I'm living in Paris, and I've been living in Paris since 2007. So naturally, take part in the struggle in Paris, not in Tokyo. And I will present the struggles in Paris from my Japanese point of view. Let's start. Oh, yeah. Now I want to start with the situation in France before COVID-19. Especially the popularity of the Olympics in France. As I show you, around 63% of French people, as well as people in Paris, support the Olympic Games. And this number is so much higher if you compare with Japan now. But if you compare with the Los Angeles, it is almost the same popularity. In Los Angeles, the popularity of the games is higher, but it is like the popularity of the games in the United States. And it is a number of the popularity before COVID-19. But we don't have any reason to think that it has changed, because there are very few coverage about the Olympics games after COVID-19 in France, and very little media covers the relationship between COVID-19 and the Paris Games. Very little. So we can safely think that nothing has changed. And with my private conversation with many people, I can confirm this. Many people haven't heard of the games in this new context. But the important thing is that COVID-19 arrived in France in the middle of a municipal election. It means that each city in France choose its mayor, and including Paris. And now I showed the photos of Madame Danielle Chimonet. Maybe some of you met her in Tokyo last year. She is a mayoral candidate for Paris city, and she take the position very firmly against the Olympics. She is the only candidate who took this position, but she already lost her election, and her pledge to make a referendum about the organization of the games wasn't taken seriously by media and other candidates, including incumbent Hidalgo. And I will briefly talk about our group, Non au JO 2024 à Paris. The important thing is there are 2 points which explains the relative weakness of our group if you compare with the NOlympics LA and Hungary Nokai and Okotwaring. One reason is our internal problems that we deliberately choose strategies that we didn't want to be a kind of affinity group. So we accept anyone from with every political colors, and it was our deliberate choice. But maybe you can easily imagine the organizational problems related to this choice. And if you want to know about more, I can talk about it later. And the second problem is that, as I told you, Olympic Games is not really a subject in France. As a result, people just simply don't know about the Olympics. And I bet that many French people even though now that in 2024, there will be the Olympic Games in France, in Paris. So in that condition, in that context, it's of course very difficult to mobilize people against the games. And sorry. And another difficulty is that many how to say, Green Party or Socialist Party or Communist Party, and some from Danielle Chimonet's party actually support the Olympics. They are not like obvious Olympic boosters like ad company or construction companies or tourism sectors. Actually, how to say, Sven, j'ai besoin de toi.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux dire?
Conseiller de Paris.
Les partis politiques, tu veux dire?
Ouais, c'est ça. Quelqu'un qui est de maire, conseiller.
So you could say like the municipal administrators.
Okay, municipal administrator, very important municipal administrator of the city of Paris. He is he's in charge of housing, and this guy wrote a book against Airbnb. But this communist guy supported the Olympics. You know, we are in the situation like this, and so the principal three lefty parties who support the Olympics, they have three main reasons to support the Olympics. One big reason is, we call it Paris Games, but actually the main stadium and main athlete village and media village will not, they won't be in Paris, but in the suburb, which called Saint-Denis in English. In French, we call it Saint-Denis. And this city really looks like the east end of London, which was developed with the London Games in 2012. There are many parallels, and mayor of Saint-Denis city is communist as well, and they say exactly same thing what labor politicians in London said at the time of London 12. So I quoted the words of Ken Livingstone. He said, I don't bid for the Olympics because I wanted 3 weeks of sport. I bid for the Olympics because it's the only way to get the billions of pounds out of the government to develop the East End. If you change the East End in Saint-Denis, it explains perfectly the situation of communist mayor of Saint-Denis. And the second one is, I don't see many political importance, but communists support the Olympics in the name of international fraternity. Yeah. And the sad point is that Socialists and Green Party support the Olympics in the name of ecological transition, which means that as Rio 2016 and Tokyo 2020, there is a project to purify the water. In the case of Paris, it is a triathlon. So they want to purify the water of Seine River, which is super polluted now. But thanks to the Olympics, we will have the Seine River with purified water. This is green discourse of to support the Olympics. We have the name for this. Yeah, it is of course greenwashing, and which is very strong for Paris Games. This existed before, but according to my analysis, the greenwashing has become really, really strong with the Paris Games. I didn't share no parallel with the London Games, which was sponsored by BP and yeah. And so I want to show a video of a PR video of the athlete village, and the woman you are seeing is the mayor of Paris from the Socialist Party, whose name is Anne Hidalgo. I want to show this video for 2 reasons, because this video shows the geographical this geography of Paris and Saint-Denis. So maybe you can figure out definitively Saint-Denis is not really Paris. Yeah, it's a suburb, poor suburb. And second reason is this video perfectly shows the greenwashing discourse of organizers. So let's see. Oh, sorry. I want, no, what? Yeah. There's an English subtitle. This is Seine River. It starts from Paris and now we arrived in the city of Saint-Denis.
5 ans nous séparent des Jeux d'été de Paris 2024. Des Jeux que nous voulons résolument utiles pour les citoyens et pour notre territoire. Des Jeux que nous voulons exemplaires en matière environnementale, j'y veillerai personnellement, urbaine et budgétaire. Des Jeux porteurs d'un héritage pour nos enfants et les générations futures. La Solidéo, que j'ai l'honneur de présider, aura la charge de livrer 40 ouvrages pérennes. Le village olympique et paralympique en est l'étendard. Cet écrin, situé en bord de Seine, au cœur de la Seine-Saint-Denis, le département le plus jeune de France, témoignera des valeurs, des savoir-faire et des ambitions qui sont les nôtres.
Le village olympique fait partie du grand dispositif d'installation et d'accueil des Jeux olympiques Paris 2024. Le lien entre tous ces sites, c'est la Seine. Le fleuve est en fait ce qui va nourrir, révéler le village olympique. Les athlètes seront bien accueillis, ils seront heureux dans ce village, au bord de l'eau, à proximité du grand stade.
Pour
la société livraison des ouvrages olympiques, le village olympique et paralympique, c'est trois choses. Évidemment, c'est d'accueillir toute la jeunesse du monde en 2024 à l'occasion des Jeux. C'est aussi un nouveau quartier qu'on va installer sur l'île Saint-Denis, Saint-Denis et Saint-Ouen à horizon 2025, un quartier d'ambition métropolitaine qui va rayonner sur l'ensemble du Grand Paris et sur toute la région Île-de-France.
Après les Jeux, il deviendra un écoquartier zéro carbone, accessible à toutes et à tous, doté de logements, d'équipements publics, de bureaux et d'espaces verts. Il témoignera de la qualité de vie que nous sommes attachés à offrir à nos habitants.
C'est un lieu de transformation de territoire en métropole, mais c'est aussi un lieu de redécouverte des paysages et des plaisirs d'être en Île-de-France, d'être au bord de la Seine et de pouvoir offrir non seulement une transformation à partir d'un héritage, c'est-à-dire la considération de l'histoire, mais aussi une dimension sociale de transformation qui va vers une durabilité de nos territoires.
Et puis c'est aussi autre chose, c'est l'incarnation du meilleur de nos savoir-faire français, des savoir-faire européens dans le domaine de la construction, dans le domaine du génie urbain, dans le domaine de la conception urbaine. Parce que sur tous ces champs, nous avons des champions internationaux. Et tous ensemble, à l'occasion des Jeux, à travers le village, nous allons donner le meilleur de nous-mêmes et la France parlera au monde.
Je compte sur vous pour donner vie à nos côtés à ce formidable projet.
Yes, this is the story before COVID-19. Now I want to move to what has changed with COVID-19. But actually, as I already said, there are little change in the media discourse and the political discourse. But of course, as you know very well, many things have changed in the level of International Olympic Committee and for the global sport business economy. And the problem is just the French media just ignore totally, and the French politics cannot intellectually figure out the importance of this change. Because maybe, I personally believe that Tokyo Games will never happen. It's simply logistically impossible. And but even if the Tokyo Games want to be cancelled, the postponement already impacts the organization of the Paris Games. And for example, now Tokyo Games are lacking the sponsors who want to sponsor the games. It's very totally understandable, and this impact the sponsoring for Paris Games. And even if I do not really like the advertisement of sponsors during the games, if we don't have sponsors, it means French public money have to finance the games, and it's definitively not a cool thing. And media journalists and politicians do not figure out the impact of COVID-19 to the games, but this is not the case for sports professionals. And one of them, there is a guy who called Guy Dru, He was our sports minister of France in 1919, and he is an IOC member. And he wrote to Tribune, I don't know how to say in English, yeah, he wrote a piece in French national media. In this piece, he said that the Paris Games, the plan for Paris Games are obsolete and outdated. And this piece is totally shocking for French organizing body. And IOC made a public statement that this opinion is Guido's personal opinion, and IOC take distance from his personal opinion. And yeah, he was criticized officially by the IOC. And he proposed something, many concrete things like Olympics must have a permanent structure instead of constructing each year, for each edition. And he also proposed to reduce the number of additional sports like surfing and skateboarding and breakdancing or those stuff. But what he didn't say, and he will never say, is that actually, if the size of the Olympics is a major source of every evil thing related to the Olympics, it's because there are too many international federations. And here, Guy Debure never said that the IOC definitively needed to reduce the number of international federations. IOC member like him cannot say this. And so this piece was, somewhat shocking in French political landscape. And we decided, our group Non au JO 2024 Paris, we decided to launch our new petition in this new political context. If I use if I say new petition, which means that we had an old petition with which we required referendum, but with this new petition, we require the pure cancellation of the games. We don't require referendum any longer. And for this petition project, we did it during the lockdown. And we wanted to launch during the lockdown, and actually we didn't succeed because it take some time. And if it take some time, it's because, we decided to have allies from all over the France, and to have allies when we were locked down. Every communication was down online, and we wrote many emails, and sometimes using the social media, and we did a very delicate negotiations with so many groups all around the France. And this was my main activity during the lockdown, and it was quite stressful because we rarely had positive reply. But what I am showing you now on the screen is the list of the groups which gave us a positive reply, and they became our co-signatories, including NOlympics LA and the Hungry no Kai from Tokyo. And the important point with this list of co-signatories is that half of our co-signatory groups are the people who are fighting against what we call in France Grand Projet Inutile et Imposé, and its abbreviation is JPEE. We can roughly translate in English as unnecessary and imposed mega projects. And yeah, there is a group which is fighting against the artificial South Park for Olympics, and that indirectly for Olympics. And there is also a group for fighting against the project of a media village, which will be constructed in Natura 2000 zone, and so on. Half of our co-signatories are, yeah, those kind of groups who are fighting territorial struggles. GPII is really active in France. It's à la mode. And why this kind of struggle has become very popular, it's because, oh, je peux pas aller la prochaine page. Merde. Ah, okay. It's because there is a very beautiful success story of La ZAD. Maybe if you are really interested in political struggles in Europe, maybe you have already heard. It was a struggle against the new airport in Bretagne, somewhere like this, and they won. And they also proposed a new lifestyle, autonomous lifestyle, like we can call it our small Zapatista or something like that, small Rojava. And this victory, which was won 2 years ago, really galvanized many struggles against GPII. Of course, this word is not translated yet in English, so you've never heard of it, but for us, Keystone Pipeline struggle is a typical GPII struggle, so maybe you can figure out what kind of struggle I am talking. And now I want to talk about the group who didn't join us. And there are really many, several dozens of groups who refused to join us, but one important group is le Comité de Vigilance 2024 Saint-Denis. Maybe we can roughly translate a watchdog group in Saint-Denis city. And they are not really a group, but rather a network of NIMBY groups in the city of Saint-Denis and the neighbor city Saint-Ouen. And they really fight against a specific project like interchange in our area and our autoroute, highway near our house, and that kind of things. And they have many, there are many Olympic related projects that bother people in these cities. So they are fighting against small NIMBY, small project, but they never take the position against the Olympics per se. And it's sometimes for some cases I understand, because if you lose too much, you have to negotiate with authority, and yeah, I understand what their choice of not to take a frontal position, but there are also some very problematic, problematic reasons that I heard when I tried to negotiate with them, like this. Because we want jobs in our city, so they are expecting some fallouts from the Olympic Games, and we want a pool. Yeah, but yeah, and the most problematic reasons for me is they love the sport, they loved Olympics, and actually it's not only this watchdog group, but among several dozens of groups we contacted, many people said this reason, because we love sports, because I love the Olympics, so it's impossible for me to be against the Olympics. So our group doesn't take a position against the sport. It's not really a strategical choice, but it was completely natural for us that yeah, we are not against the sports per se, but when it costs several billions and when it evicts too many people, we are against that kind of mega sport event. That was our position. But when you face so many people who state that we can't be against the Olympics because we love the sport, personally, I started thinking that maybe we have to think about the sports itself. And actually, as we do not take anti-sport positions, there are anti-sports people in France who criticize our position. And now on the screen, you see the book cover of one of those kind of authors, whose name is Marc Perelman, who wrote a book, Le Sport Barbare, and he criticized the ideology of the sport. And this guy was working with our group actually in 2017, but they left for this reason. And Marc Perelman's ultimate enemy is Pierre de Coubertin. And I didn't study Pierre de Coubertin. Yeah, I know actually very little about him, but with my personal experience with for this petition, and yeah, I started to realize that Coubertin, yeah, it's very important to study what he said, and especially he's French, and he's a founder of the Olympics, and French IOC member like Guidry want to inscribe the Olympic spirit on the UNESCO World Heritage List, and yeah, I think it's kind of French responsibility for me to criticize the Coubertin and his heritage, not only for France, but the whole world. So, yeah, so thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Oh, merci Natsuko, that was fantastic. Thanks so much. And I think, yeah, we just want to spend some time discussing. I'll kick us off with a few questions, but then we're going to kind of turn it over to anyone, anyone joining. So it's going to be, we want it to be an open dialogue. The purpose of these conversations is to bring people who are actively organizing and in struggle in their own communities and cities together to learn from each other. So yeah, I'll start to warm us up, but yeah, I would love maybe to start if you mentioned when we were watching that that video, which I think as a lot of people noted, looked and sounded almost exactly like the promotional videos for every gentrifying project and major development that we see in our communities. I'm thinking of, in LA, I live right near the 6th Street Bridge and river redevelopment, and that's what the video looks like for that. These, fancy computer generated images where somehow, they only generate images of white people too. Definitely notice that in this video as well. And you mentioned what they're not showing is the people who are being evicted. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about who is being evicted for the Olympic Village that's being proposed. What are some of the specific structures that are being demolished to make way for the Olympic Village, and who's being displaced
because Anne already knows the answer actually.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to ask the question. I'm going to be honest, and I know, but yeah, if you could talk about it.
It's very symbolic case. There is a very symbolic case. There were how to say foyer. There was a collective house for migrant workers.
It was sort of like a hostel, basically, like temporary living.
Yeah. There were 300 people, around 300 people, and they are still living there. But the case is a bit problematic now because they made a deal with the Olympic Authority. They are, and actually they won partially because the initial plan was they will be evicted very far away from their original city, and that was the heart of their negotiation. They want to be back to their actual place. And of course, it's impossible because there will be an athlete village. It is huge. They can't return to the exact same place, but they obtain their deal to return to nearby. And of course, they are not completely happy with the result because they have to live in kind of very precarious housing during the 2 or 3 years before the construction of new housing. But basically, they made a deal, and they do not take a position against the Olympics. It's clear. And I understand totally, because if they insist too much, we don't want this new housing plan or so on, they lose too many. So yeah, I completely understand their position.
And they had, right, they were able at one point to sit down with a member of the IOC,
No, not the migrant workers, but
the committee.
Watchdog groups, some representatives, they met the IOC group, yes.
But then he didn't listen to their demands, if I remember correctly.
No, of course not, because actually it was obvious from the beginning because they met a communication man from the IOC, and those communication man have no authority about the project, but the job is communication. It's clear that it's a very token effort.
Yeah, and that seems to be a little bit of the theme of some of the struggle. You know, that there are some deals that get made and then get broken, and I'm thinking specifically too about Airbnb. Right? And the hotel workers. Yeah. If you want to talk a little bit about what happened there.
But actually, I think many things have changed with COVID-19, with the Airbnb. I didn't follow so much, but it's obvious that maybe many people are even talking about maybe Airbnb will not be the sponsor for a long time for IOC because their business has so many troubles, and it's not the right time for the activity. And but if your question about Anna is about the negotiation between Paris mayor and IOC, definitely the deal wasn't made because mayor of Paris has no authority to change the international program for Olympic movement.
And she's against Airbnb, right? Or historically has been.
Yeah, she's against, and especially the housing responsible communist guy is really against, and he wrote a book against Airbnb.
Yeah. Yeah, and for folks who may not know, after the deal for the contract for 2024 was signed, Airbnb announced a major sponsorship deal with the Olympics.
Yeah.
So a lot of the leaders in Paris were not happy about that, but as Natsuko said, couldn't really do anything about it.
Yeah.
So I think actually we have about 15, 20 minutes left. I'd love to open it up to some questions from the group. That was really yeah, that was a really incredible presentation, and I'm sure people have questions, comments, things they might want to share, any similarities between what's happening in our city and what's happening in Paris. If folks, maybe if you want to raise your hands and I can call on people and unmute you in relative order. And maybe while folks are gathering their questions, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know we have at least one expert in the audience on the legacy and eugenicist, racist views of Pierre de Coubertin. So maybe if anyone who knows about that wants to jump in, I would also welcome that as a starting point.
Sorry, are you asking people to speak or to
Julian.
hands up?
Nice to meet you.
Julian, great. Yes, please jump in.
Yeah, okay, right. So there's quite a lot of stuff, similarities really with London, I think.
Yeah,
The way
it's
that
obvious.
Tuco is describing, yeah.
Mm.
And I think it's important to understand the sort of local context as to why the Olympics gets taken up by particular cities. It will vary from one place to another, but maybe London and Paris are a little bit more similar than say what it is in with LA and New York or something like that. Because I mean, again, by and large, the so-called progressives in I would say probably Europe as a whole are keener on public, they're keener on public spending, and they regard the Olympics as being a project which incorrectly, but nevertheless, they regard it as a project which is going to bring infrastructure and other benefits, and so the Conservatives tend to be less keen because it involves public spending, and they get more annoyed with cost. And actually, that was a big issue in Calgary. I think was that it was Conservatives who were really opposed to the Calgary bid. Of course, there's a lot of rubbish spoken as well, because Livingston, who was described as a red Ken, became completely, he adopted the most bizarre position. He thought that London could be paid for out of making a profit from property development. He actually became convinced that property development was the solution to the costs of London 2012, which was total nonsense. And he also thought that there was a need for a big redevelopment program like London 2012, when in fact there already was an enormous £4 billion redevelopment program called Stratford City, which is right next door to the Olympic Park, which he himself gave permission for. I mean, there's just a lot of kind of confusion, lying. So it's difficult to actually necessarily pay a lot of attention to what these people say, because it could go into a lot of detail. I don't want to go into too much detail now. So you end up with people making claims about the benefits that are going to accrue, which are total rubbish, and actually not just rubbish, but actually destructive, because in the case of London, they demolished a viable industrial district completely, which has produced almost no benefits at all, and has resulted in an enormous, not inside of the Olympic Park, because they've expanded the legacy zone, so-called legacy zone, into other industrial areas. They've ended up with a lot of house building of unaffordable housing. So, I mean, it's difficult to explain this just now in detail. So I think you end up with a lot of real kind of just nonsense, and the local media are remarkably uncritical. British media, and as from what you're saying, French media are uncritical and reproduce a lot of this rubbish. And like there was one very famous picture of the Olympic Park, and it showed a great big pile of mud. This was actually part of what used to be called the Stratford Raillands, which is where the Stratford City project was built. But this was widely used to demonstrate that the Olympic Park was derelict. There was nothing in it. It was total rubbish. This was the use of a picture of a separate piece of land. This kind of stuff was put out without any care or attention. So you do end up with just a pack of lies, and the kind of videos which Natsuko showed, just turn up all the time.
Yeah.
We also have things, people, the same problem with people opposing the Olympics is we have people who would say, I'm not anti-Olympics, because people didn't want to be seen as anti-Olympics. But, in other words, they had objections, but they had great difficulty putting them across because they didn't want to be seen as anti-Olympics. So I think it is important also to get a grip on why the Olympics has got such a grip on the public imagination, because and I think it's important from therefore looking at the myth making that goes around the Olympics and the lies around the Coubertin, and you're talking about eugenicist behavior or attitudes. I mean, the whole story of de Coubertin is one big myth, and there are plenty of good discussions about de Coubertin's openly racist attitudes. The fact that he saw this as a colonial enterprise, really, it had nothing to do with diversity or even bringing in women. I mean, women weren't meant to be in the Olympics at all. So you have a white supremacist image, viewpoint behind this, and de Coubertin actually thought that the Olympic spirit was best represented by the Berlin Games. I mean, tackling that kind of mythology, I think, is important in undermining the understanding of you might say, the benefit, the great good that the Olympics brings, along with the lies about the benefits which are non-existent. In London, we had a fantastic report which was produced on behalf of the government called Game Plan, produced in 2002 before the Olympic bid was launched, which said, don't expect to get benefits. It's a party, it's a national celebration. And that really is the point, is that is what this thing is. It's a big party. So the British government knew perfectly well what they were getting. They just lied about it. So why are they lying? Again, you come back to, I think, the vanity of politicians and the mythology and the fact that people, you know, in Britain, we had the situation where the first 3 days, British athletes weren't winning gold medals. And the media started saying, well, what's going on? We're not winning any medals. On the first Tuesday, they won a whole pile of gold medals. After that, everybody said, oh, fantastic. So it's a very superficial project, and it is actually liked for very superficial reasons. And I think that the points that Natsuko makes about what is sport are also relevant. Mark Perelman's book is devastating. And I think that examining some of those issues, I know, I'm sorry, I'm rabbiting on a lot here, but I think those are important issues to examine when you're trying to tackle why the Olympics get so much public support. And anyway, so I think that's enough for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. Yeah, does anyone, any other questions or responses to that? I know a lot of people, there are some new names and faces I see and other folks who I know, and I'm itching to call on and embarrass you, but people who I know have fought and organized against, you know, similar types of myth making, myths of development, myths of certain legacies, you know, certain false promises. And so I'd love to hear any questions, or even if folks just want to share experiences that they've had confronting, you know, confronting that in their work or conversations they've had with people. Raise your, there should be a little button if you go to the participant screen at the bottom to raise your hand, or, you know, since we're all a very polite group, if anyone wants to jump in as well, feel free. I guess I can alternate and ask another question to Natsuko. You mentioned, so with the petition, that you all have shifted from talking about a referendum or a vote and really more explicitly calling for the cancellation of the games. And I know that's something that's become much more of a conversation in the United States in general, the question of reform, you know, can we change something a little bit, or do we abolish it? And so I'm curious for you, you know, how did you personally come to the point of we need to cancel the games? We can't just, we can't fix them a little.
Yeah, of course, we always wanted to cancel the Olympics, of course. If we required a referendum before, it's for to cancel. It's not for because we value democratic consultation or that kind of thing. But if we chose the referendum before, strategically, it's to part emphasize on the fact that we didn't have, unlike Hamburg or Calgary or any former candidate city which said no to the games. The only reason was it. So, but now with COVID-19, we said that now maybe it's time to change completely the discourse, not our fundamental demand. But we thought we can have some, we have more arguments to cancel the Olympics because of COVID-19. It's clear, and it will be clearer and clearer later. It's purely strategic stuff, actually. We always wanted to cancel the games, but with COVID-19, we thought that it's an opportunity to radicalize our discourse. Yeah.
Great.
Can I say one other thing also about in Paris? It was interesting that, which is I think a feature maybe more in Europe maybe than in the States, is that at one time Anne Hidalgo was actually pretty skeptical about having the games.
Yeah, that's an important point. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was kind of overruled by Hollande. So you've got this political process where, and this was very much the case in Britain, where Blair basically, he was the person who made the decision. If Blair hadn't made the decision, the Olympics wouldn't have happened. So that kind of centralization of power, overruling local groups, because when the Olympics had got going, the whole political establishment swung behind the Olympics. It was just completely blanket approval, and every mayor, every level of authority was honed up to it. Even the kind of what we call non-governmental organizations were all pushing out stuff about how wonderful the Olympics was going to be.
Yeah, of course, why Hidalgo shifted his attitude after being elected, it's behind the curtain, so of course no one can know. But there is a rumor who said that Prime Minister at the time, whose name is Manuel Valls, was Olympic supporters. He convinced Hidalgo to support the Olympics, but of course no one can officially know. But for me, the point is that actually Olympics take place each time in different country. So I think simply professional politics don't know about the Olympics, really. I really think so, because now, unlike Hungary Nokai or NOlympics LA, we work closely with established political parties like La France Insoumise, the Daniel Chimonet, and some members of Green Party. And they take part in our meeting, and of course they know almost nothing. And it's completely understandable, because it's not their job to study the, this kind of stuff, which happens once in a lifetime. Their main job is to be elected each time. And they just simply don't know. So if someone is convinced to have games in your country, or they just don't have time. And they are simply intellectually lazy, I think.
I don't entirely agree with that, because in the case of London, as I said, we had the situation where the government itself, Tony Blair, had asked for a report about whether the Olympics would be a good idea. And the game plan report said no. Well, they didn't say no, they just said don't expect to get benefits. So they actually Tony Blair signed the document himself. So he knew perfectly well what the advice was. And I'm afraid I do think that politicians, I think the business of them wanting to be elected is entirely correct. They do regard it as a vote winner. And sport, as I said, in Britain, if you win lots of medals, you win World Cups, things like that. You know, the 1966 World Cup is still, you know, as a high point in British sport and still referred to. It gets people votes. I think there is a kind of a vanity interest or whatever for politicians. And I can't comment necessarily on other countries, but certainly in Britain, that is the case.
How about Los Angeles? I want to know. Do you think Eric Garnetier knows very well about the Olympics?
Natsuko, are you asking us in LA if we think Eric Garcetti knows about the Olympics? Oh yeah, I would love to turn that to any members of our group in LA. I know I'm definitely, for this one, I'm going to call on a couple of people if no one speaks up.
I think Garcetti thinks he knows a lot about the Olympics. He knows about his experience of the Olympics, which is not the experience of everybody else at the Olympics. So I think he thinks he knows more than he knows. Because like he talks a lot about how as a child, you know, he really enjoyed going to the games, and he and this guy Casey Wasserman kind of refer themselves as the '84 boys, because they were both like teenagers during the '84 Olympics, and they were in very privileged positions, and like Casey Wasserman did the torch run when he was like 15, and so they kind of frame the Olympics in a way that you would frame it if you were like upper middle class or upper class, you know, white men enjoying the spoils of, you know, capitalism, which is probably a lot of fun, but that's not the experience most people have.
I think to go back to this business of whether politicians know, I think that if you look at most of the surveys that are done before Olympics bids or when the bids get started, they are usually quite popular. What's interesting is that bids lose popularity as campaigns get going. So I think for politicians, when if say, for example, the pre-bid surveys are done and they find that 60-70% of the people think, oh, that's going to be a good idea, they don't have a lot of public resistance. Whether or not they know much about it, they nevertheless have a whole range of options to say, yeah, we're going to build affordable housing and all that kind of stuff, which is, you know, the usual stuff you get. So they're able to build a program which they claim will deliver benefits. It's only when they're actually opposed, as in places like Hamburg or, sorry, the one in Canada, I've forgotten, Calgary and so on, then suddenly they realize that they're up against a problem, and public opinion has shifted in so many of these events recently that they start to find themselves having to rethink. So I think it's not quite as simple as saying, you know, that they kind of know. Their interest, as Natsuko correctly says, is to get re-elected. So if they think they're going to achieve that goal and they don't have people arguing strongly and influencing public opinion, then I think they'll just go for it. But it's interesting to see how many cities have, or, you know, areas have voted against the Olympics once they've had the opportunity to do so. So building an effective campaign is definitely part of the process of undermining, you know, those politicians and their desire to go ahead, you know, with projects like this.
Yeah, but I want to say the whole political games around the Olympics has definitively changed with this COVID-19 and the trouble with Tokyo Games. And now in Paris, mayoral election is tomorrow, actually. And in Japan, in Tokyo, there will be an election, or I forgot the date, but soon, very soon, in the beginning of July. And of course, in this context, the Olympics is a big issue, and there's a guy who wants to cancel maybe Olympics LA guys have heard of his name, Taro Yamamoto, and he's sometimes called Japanese Bernie Sanders, and yeah, his pledge is canceling the games. I don't think he will be elected, but he's not like Daniel Shimone in terms of media exposure. Taro Yamamoto is so much more important, and yeah, the game has changed definitively with coronavirus. So yeah, even in Paris, it depends on us. It depends on our struggle to keep on changing the political games.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at, sorry, so one other thing about the United States, I mean, there was a really effective campaign in Boston, which basically knocked the games out, and which is why it went to LA. I mean, that campaign, and we had quite a lot of contact with people in Boston, and they hit a lot of sort of key issues and were winning the argument, and showed that once you've launched a campaign, you do have the possibility of changing the political, the direction of thought in a city. And I think that was very interesting in terms of how campaigns work in different places. In London, we didn't really have, frankly, much of a campaign. It was always very late. There was no referendum. I can't claim any great success at all. But having seen since then where there have been referenda, how cities have been able to combat the games, I think it's been very instructive for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to note, so Cat C has their hand up. I'm gonna unmute you.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can hear you.
I guess I was wondering, what part, I'm trying to see if I can like word this the right way. I want to know what is the role of people who are really big sports fans and people who are athletes, who are like against the Olympics, and like what do they play a part, if any, in like any successful like campaigning against the Olympics? Because I think that's like yeah, I just have a lot of curiosity surrounding that. Yeah. Should I word that differently? Maybe I should like word it a little bit better. First of all, for successful campaigns against the bid, such as like Boston, what part have athletes and pro sports people played in that?
Yeah. But I can't answer because we don't have that kind of case in France. Definitively not. I don't know any sports professional or athlete who take position against the games. No, there is no case at all like this in France. Maybe in Japan, there are some skeptical athletes in Japan, but we can't call them NOlympic athletes. I don't know any of them in Japan either. Sorry.
I don't think by and large that you can expect athletes to be actually opposed to the games, but there are certainly athletes who are concerned about the way in which the games operate. I mean, Jules Boykoff, I think, is participating. You would have something to say about this. But there was a guy called Halstead, who was a fencer in the British Olympic team, and he talked out about problems with the way in which the Olympics operate. And I think there is a kind of body of opinion developing among athletes about the way. I mean, obviously they're concerned about their own freedom to express themselves and their human rights, as in terms of making protests and so on. But I think that there is a sort of some maybe fairly small groundswell of opinion that the Olympics aren't really doing what they should be doing. But I don't know, maybe if I can invite Jules Boykoff to have a go, because he's listening in, I hope.
Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, Jules. Yeah, you must talk about Vikash Duraso. Yeah, I completely forgot about him. Yeah, please talk about him.
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, Vikash Dorasu is a great French footballer, World Cup, Olympics, and I actually did an event with him a week or two ago, and he surprised me at how thoroughly critical he was of the Olympics. I'm kind of a little bit more accustomed to Olympic athletes that come in the mold that Julian described, where they can be more critical of the way the games kind of affect communities in sort of small ways here and there. But his critique was very thoroughgoing. So it seems to me that if I were in Paris, I would certainly be interested in trying to have a conversation with him. Could be a really good ally. He was running for office. I guess he just narrowly lost. Danielle Simonet was also at this event that I'm talking about, and she chalked it up to the lack of getting people out to vote in the face of coronavirus. But anyways, it does seem to me that he'd be good. And there are a number of groups right now. In fact, here in the United States, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee athlete group just came out in the last 24 hours against the rule in the Olympic Charter that says that athletes can't protest at the games. So there's a lot of momentum right now against that. And it seems like maybe that could be captured and sort of reformatted into anti-Olympics activism of the type that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, Kat, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think that like it's one thing to try to kind of push the Olympics out of each individual city and speak to people on like maybe those issues around housing or this or that. But like if I would imagine that my most like instinctual feeling is that actually taking down the Olympics entirely is going to require that like all of the people who are very super into sports, pro sports, big fans, and the athletes themselves, and especially the ones who have been like, especially the ones who have been like personally affected, would have to, yeah, there would have to be like a pretty massive movement of people being able to speak freely about that. But I'm sure there's a lot of athletes who have been like disaffected and abused and exploited who don't feel like they can really come out about it. Or if there was like yeah, like that angle on it, I feel like would probably be necessary for the games themselves to really be seen by by and large by the general public as like a wholly bad thing for abolishment. So yeah.
There've definitely been, I mean, in terms of the various scandals around abuse, I mean, there are a lot of athletes who are very disillusioned with the, you might say, the IOC bureaucracy, the way in which it fails to tackle, deal with issues of human rights and abuse and so on. So there are issues for athletes. They may not be quite the same as they are for the communities that are affected by again, a bid, which is they get a knock down, their homes or whatever, and impact on taxation and et cetera, but nevertheless I think that there is a much greater anxiety about how the IOC and the Olympics operate. And on Twitter, this is, there really a lot of people do go on about how they think that they just simply are failing, sports bodies as a whole, but the Olympics in particular, as you might say, the top of the tree, doesn't get to grips with those issues. Yeah, anyway, of course there have been famous protests in the past, but anyway.
Yeah, thinking about the Jules brought up Article 50 from the Olympic Charter and the way that the IOC has historically responded to protest. I'm curious, has anyone anyone on this call familiar with any of some of the more famous Olympic protests that have happened and what the response has been?
Are you referring to the response from the IOC or the response from other athletes, or what?
I guess both. I was thinking mainly the IOC, but yeah, what, how have those protests been met? What have they been about? What's the content of them been?
I can't remember. There was a protest just recently, wasn't there, where two athletes protested, and at the same time as the IOC was saying that they thought that protests should be allowed, they then sanctioned these two people. I think it was Jules better about that. I mean, there are protests, and then there are kind of, and the IOC tends to sort of take the attitude, well, not on our watch. You can protest somewhere else, but don't do it, where we are, kind of thing. So, but anyway, maybe I don't know. I haven't asked Jules to comment on that.
Sure. I mean, I think the athletes you're speaking of are Gwen Berry, the hammer thrower from the United States, and Racing Bowden, who's on the fencing team in the United States. And at the Pan American Games in July 2019, they both protested on the medal stand. Berry put her fist up like Carlos and Smith did back in the day, and Racing Bowden took a knee a la Kaepernick. And they were both sanctioned by the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and given a 1-year probation. With all that's been happening recently, they have been asking for an apology. In fact, Gwen Berry has gotten one now from the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And as I say, there's actually movement within the body of athletes in the United States to try to get rid of this Rule 50 of the Olympic Charter. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like this right now, of athletes standing up and pushing back against this particular rule. I mean, personally, I would chalk it up to the fact that there's been all these movements that you all on this call are involved with that have kind of created space for the athletes to more comfortably get out there and push back. That's one of the major factors, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I would say, I know I tend to be kind of an optimistic person in general, but I would say right now is an incredibly propitious moment for reaching out to athletes who might like to team up with what we're talking about here today, more critical, thoroughgoingly critical assessments of the Olympic Games.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the case of Tokyo, when Tokyo was postponed, I mean, athletes, I don't know to what extent, well, athletes definitely.
For Japanese athletes, it's very difficult to speak up against the Tokyo Games because they want to take part in, but ex-athletes, maybe if you are super Olympic nerd, you must know Yuko Arimori. She's a marathon runner who got a silver medal in Barcelona and bronze medal in Atlanta. She is excluded from any Olympic-related organization, but she is very famous because she got 2 medals with a marathon. And she said, we must cancel Tokyo Games definitively if it's too difficult to, but she has no official power inside the whole organization. Yeah.
But I think worldwide athletes were saying this can't go ahead, weren't they? So there was a big kind of response to the idea. The IC was sitting around, and the Japanese Olympic Committee was sitting around saying, going to wait and see. And there were a lot of athletes saying this can't be allowed to go on because it's just not viable, et cetera, et cetera. And that had an impact on, on the postponement. So that did also invigorate athlete activism. And I think for a lot of athletes, they're not people who are going to, most of them, ever earn very much from the Olympics. I mean, they are sort of unpaid labor, really. And I think, again, that has also had some impact, because I think part of the movement in the States with athletes is that they are restricted in what they can earn. For example, at the college level, and I'm not an expert on this, but there seems to be quite a lot of discussion about the fact that athletes aren't able to get sponsorship and stuff like that. And so actually there's a kind of kickback in the way in which the system treats athletes as a whole and doesn't pay attention to them and restricts their rights. So part and parcel of the fact that that's happening, I think is that maybe some athletes have also become more aware of the, the kind of environmental hazards and the damage to communities and so on. I don't know to what extent, but to some extent.
Great. I know we're a little bit over, so I wanted to start winding us down. I don't know if anyone has any final questions for Natsuko or things that they wanted to share. Please feel free again to jump in or raise your hand. Otherwise, Natsuko, I don't know if you have any, final parting thoughts or questions for us.
It's not a question, but I think this project of international teaching is just really great. It's very difficult to organize around many time zone. It's for sure, but maybe not monthly. I don't think so, but we have. I'd like to have, from time to time.
Yeah, have some like regular meetings and conversations.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, and do you have any asks for us? Or are there things that that we can do, those of us in other cities, in LA, in Portland, and London? I know we have folks in a variety of cities on this call, which is great. What can we do to support your struggle in Paris right now?
Or I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand.
Oh, what can we do to help in Paris? Are there any things we can do, like signing the petition, sharing the petition?
You already helped us. You made a graphic for us, and you made an English translation for us, and because we are so much weaker than Olympics LA. So if maybe I think I will ask your help for graphic image or English translation very often.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, because I think, like I said at the beginning, it's the same fight, and if you win, that helps us. It helps all of us. So we want to make sure that you win in Paris and Saint-Denis. Any final questions or thoughts from folks who have been listening and watching? The only reason I'm being a little strict on time, I'm going to post in the chat, but we have, a lot of us are going to be heading over to Inglewood on the other side. Well, for me, I should say on the other side of town. For some people, it's close. But for me personally, I have a little bit of a drive ahead to support our friends at the Lenox Inglewood Tenants Union. They're supporting some tenants who are members who live across the street from the big SoFi Stadium and are facing displacement related to the stadium, very similar to the tenants in Saint-Denis who are, facing eviction for the Olympic Village.
I'd just like to say it's always very encouraging whenever a new campaign emerges. It's just incredible to see. We were just delighted when Boston sort of blew up. It was incredible in London to see, and also to be able to talk to people in Boston. We had visitors come from Boston, and to be able to discuss what happened in London, and also with Rio. We had a lot of contact with people in Rio. So it's really encouraging when these campaigns start up, and to be able to contribute at a distance for the most part. So thanks to both LA, NOlympics LA, and No Show Paris. No Show. I can't remember is it No Show 2024 Paris. Anyway, fantastic for both campaigns. We're really it's very exciting.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, everyone. And I think at this point too, like I mentioned, I'm probably gonna jump off to get dressed and drive over, but people are welcome to stick around, chat, hang out. Again, this is much less of a formal lecture or sort of classroom style period. And, we want people to talk to each other. So feel free to do that. But the more formal or organized portion is over. So as you were. Natsuko, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're amazing. So honored to work with you.
Me, and it was really nice, and
Yeah.
See you
Give
in
Hector a
Mexico.
little head scratch for us. Natsuko has a very cute dog. I saved that for the end. Yeah. Oh yeah. People want to see the dog.
Hector?